when vampire films kind of rise in popularity tends to also be trending with an economic cycle.
Oceans and borders, we find ourselves in a time where we're being challenged by something that creeps and infects the population.
It's just this tragic story of getting taken over, and you get to have a little fun throughout that tragedy.
You have no idea what you're getting yourself into here.
Danny, where are you? Answer me.
For actors, what was it like to step into this Stephen King world, and what makes it such an exciting challenge for actors?
I mean, for me, it would be with acting, you're like always trying to get back to that childlike state where vampires are real. And when you watch something full through or read the novel, you're always like, it's very easy to believe, but with film, when you're stopping and starting, it's like you kind of always have to, how do you like keep the childlike sense of something is really, really occurring?
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think that we were kind of really blessed with a really good, crew who all kind of like really lifted up this world in a way that kind of allowed us to feel like we could really lose ourselves in it.
Yeah, how did Gary and the crew do that? Like lose yourself in that? You said like the childlike imagination almost.
Well, it helps having children on set, actually, in this case. Because they can do it. And so I think that, like you were talking about kind of the experience of even just with Jordan, like what would you actually do if a vampire coming into the room, and how seriously they can very quickly take it, which is like, well, I'd grab that steak and then I'd do the thing.
Yeah, dead serious, not funny and so then you kind of, through osmosis kind of absorb some of that. So that sincere urge to kind of disappear into the world. But Gary, there's a lot of awesome shots in here. There's one shot in particular that was, I think it was a tracking shot chasing me out of a church into an empty street. And with a shot like that on a Steadicam, it has to be a 360 set, meaning like anywhere you point the camera, you can use that footage. And so that was the first moment where it was like, besides the camera and my peripheries, it all felt like there was no reminders of this is a film set. And that was pretty trippy. That was maybe the first moment I was like actually fucking scared.
Also, there were a couple of potholes, and if you stepped in one, I think you were gonna roll your ankle and be out for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
So there was genuine stakes and fear.
There was some stakes involved.
What makes Salem's Lot such like a timeless tale, and why was now the time to like revisit? Because I think it's the first movie adaptation, and it's like it feels so prominent, even though it's set in the 70s, but so relevant now. I
feel like it's economically the times that we're in. So yeah, we've got a big income wealth disparity, and I feel like that kind of when these, someone did the study saying like when vampire films kind of rise in popularity tends to also be trending with an economic cycle.
Really?
Versus zombie films, which is actually so it just depends on like whether you're in a boom economy or in this case, massive inflation and inequality of wealth.
I think possibly because we find ourselves presently, I would say in the last starting decade, and certainly in the last 6 years or so, we find ourselves not only in Maine, in New England, in the States, but across oceans and borders. We find ourselves in a time where we're being challenged by something that creeps and infects the population. And it's brought on by in the personalities of people who are seductive and who find a way into people's minds and hearts, and they get those talents in. And it's happened in the world before, and all the signs are there. But because I think most of us don't revisit history, we don't recognize when things are happening. And so the last incarnations of Stephen King's Salem's Lot, the story of it, we weren't in times that were so clearly sort of mirroring the need for community to act or not act, to flee, to fight, or to just be seduced. And we see the fallout of that.
Yeah, it's like how in like the 70s, Stephen King's laid out this kind of like blueprint almost, but we just haven't acted on the warnings on from what, like you said, like you don't read the warnings of history.
And I love the fact that every element of it does give you that nostalgia feel of 1975. You know, the production values, the cinematography, the language in which Gary Doberman is telling that story. It is a one whole delicious. You know, the 70s were not. I don't look back, and I don't go to like 70s parties and 80s parties. And I was like, you know, let's just have a party. But I've never. The only thing about the 70s was the early 70s, especially the late 60s, was the music, because it had lyrics, it had purpose, and it had funk and all of that. But it made me, until Straker and Barlow appear, it was such a beautiful remembrance of that era physically. And I wouldn't even know, it wasn't a beautiful era in fashion or anything else. But so that's the power of, you know, us being seduced into remembering the loveliness of it, you know, family and all, and standing up to the bully on the playground and all that kind of thing, rather than just let's pile on with the bully online.
You know, I think you know, Stephen King talks a lot about how this the sort of the metaphor of like this town in like getting taken over, and I think for him it was a lot of a metaphor of a town going through transitions and sort of this idea of like decay and I think, you know, I think in that sense, like you see this happening, whether, you know, big changes in towns, whether it's the big box stores coming in and sort of pushing out little you know, smaller businesses and just sort of changing the fabric of the town. I think that's something that that kind of resonates today. And you know, I also think that it has like even though it took place contemporarily when you wrote it, you know, it takes place in the 70s and Stephen King wrote it in the 70s. I feel like it has this really, kind of really timeless quality, this small town that really could have, you know, it is so funny because now it is a period piece, but it wasn't intended to be at the time. So it's really cool to sort of revisit it now and have it as the 70s aesthetic. And, you know, I have these awesome sideburns in the movie. And for me, it just like has this amazing retro feel that is so cool and sort of refreshing to see now. And it was a funny reminder for me that like, oh no, this wasn't meant to be this period piece. This was just what it, you know, the era in which it was written. And I'm so glad they didn't try to modernize it and bring it into the, you know, 2024. I'm so glad that they kept it taking place in the 70s, because the aesthetic is so wonderful. And it's, for me, it was such a, you know, I live in Southern California and it's bright blue skies every day. And it was just so fun, you know, when I'm watching it and when I experienced it to be in fall in New England.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something about like that Stephen King aesthetic, like Derry in It. It's just that kind of old school vibe. That, like you said, that very nostalgic feel.
It doesn't go away, right? Yeah.
No. Yeah. Something you mentioned quite interesting about the old town. Like, I think with Ben Mears, there was an interesting quote something about why do you think he chose this town? It's like a dying town, and like with the undead, is kind of, that was a really interesting kind of almost like social commentary that you were referring to there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm probably not the person to articulate it the best, but I just think that, I know that was something that a metaphor that Stephen King was touching upon. But I really see the town as a character in this movie. It's not the main character in this movie. It's just this, you meet all these people and the town is alive, and the milkman is coming, the postman, and everyone kind of knows each other on this main street, and people are up in each other's business, and then you just sort of watch as the town gets subsumed and taken over by this virus, for lack of a better word, and just it seems it's just this tragic story of getting taken over, and you get to have a little fun throughout that tragedy.
What makes vampires such like a scary villain? Because it obviously goes back to like Nosferatu in the silent era, and then still really scary and prominent in horror movies now. Like, what kind of brings the fear out of in that in us?
It's the intellectual properties that they carry, the wisdom and trying to outsmart somebody who's been around for that long and who is that calm and mysterious. There's a lot of unknowns there, and the possibilities are sort of endless.
That's really well put, yeah. And the last part, I read that Stephen King was the EP executive producer on that. Did you have any conversations with him, or any kind of advice about his vision, or was it mostly through the text and Gary?
Yeah, through the text and Gary.
Yeah, Gary would kind of deliver us little bits of news about Stephen and things that he was, running by Stephen, and so it was kind of great because he was like this mysterious kind of presence that was there. I think if he was actually on set, I would have been terrified. What's
it like to step into this Stephen King world as an actor? It must be such an exciting challenge for actors. It's led to some of the most critically acclaimed performances in movie history, like Jack Nicholson, Kathy Bates.
It's like being invited into a large gymnasium where anything is possible, and you get to play, and you hope that the person that is saying, "Oh, okay, move over to the what do you call it, dodgeball court now. Okay, now play the dodgeball." So it's just like a good workout, but you're doing it in the smartest arena possible.
I'm not sure how much of this is spoiler, but what was it like for your transformation into a vampire?
Yeah, no, I think we can talk about it. I think people kind of know what's going on in the movie, and that this town is getting taken over, and of course there's source material too. I don't think it's too big of a spoiler, and it happens early on. That was the most interesting part for me, and the thing that attracted me to the project in the first place was the opportunity to not just play a vampire, because that was super fun, but as an actor, like the most interesting part was to play the in-between as the character is transforming. And I think through my character Mike Ryerson, I get the task of really telling that transition. I feel like that's sort of the role of my character, to show the dread of where I might be going, and the unknown, and the fear of knowing that something is happening to me, but I can't remember quite what happened to get there. And it's sort of a fear too. It's like when you start getting sick for the first time, and you don't know, like, oh no, is this the flu? Is this a cough? Am I going to feel better tomorrow? Am I going to feel, and not quite knowing where you're going? Like, you get like a hint of that, but like times a million, because you have this like scary trauma that he can't quite remember. And so that was really interesting to play with. And yeah, certainly, I mean, you identified it. It was the thing that attracted me most to the movie and to the character.